Global happenings today. We communicate, we analyze global news. Stay tuned.
Hello beautiful people, welcome back to Global Happiness Today YouTube channel. Many Nigerians, including my humble self, did not know the dynamics of our politics that is rooted not only in history, but it has been what has been passed on from generation to generation, and they have probably made up their mind and sworn not to change the status quo. And for some reasons, some of these histories are not really found in our history books, probably because of eyewitness account that's not been there. But right now, as we speak, some of our elder statements are gradually phasing out with those informations that are unique and that most new generations don't have at their fingertips, and they're busy really trying to change a narrative that they do not know how it all began. It's a long one, but honestly, I think it's an eye-opener so that this generation will actually have an idea of what they are up against. It's a big one if you ask me. And this is actually coming from Chief Edwin Clark. A true life story, a witness account, life narrative that we do not know, and for better understanding have decided to tell Nigerians what happened in history and why we are seeing what we are seeing right now. I may take God knows what to change this narrative. But before we go into news proper, kindly subscribe to our channel by clicking on the right subscribe button beside it. You've set bell notification icon. Please go ahead, click on it to get notified as soon as we update our channel on YouTube. The former Federal Commissioner for Information and South leader Chief Edwin Clark has said that one of the reasons the government of former head of state General Yakubu Gowon was overthrown was the appointment of Engineer Odo, a Calabari man from Rivers State, as the general manager of the Nigerian National Oil Corporation, that's NNOC, which became Nigerian National Petroleum Company, otherwise known as NPC. Now, Clark, who noted this in his page, in his 688 page, Brutally Frank, his autobiography, said that late former head of state and federal commissioner for communications in Gowon's government and some others were not happy with the appointment of Odo, whom they saw as an Igbo man and therefore a security risk to the country. He said that when Gowon announced Engineer Odo as the new general manager, which was accepted by a majority of the council members, the then Brigadier General Mohammed immediately took his case and swagger stick and walked out without saying a word. Now, Clark wrote, and I quote, "I've read several views on why General Yakubu Gowon's government was overthrown on July 29, 1975. Dan Egbese, in his book Ibrahim Babangida, The Military, Politics and Power in Nigeria, gave some background when he rightly asserted that the General Yakubu Gowon's government was doing extremely fine economically and had lots of money for the development of infrastructure across Nigeria. And the head of state also used the available resources at his disposal to earn the respect and admiration of working class people in the country when he appointed the Chief Udoji Commission to review salaries and allowances of government workers. That therefore made General Gowon a man of the moment." Now, however, when the civil and public servants were basking in this euphoria of salary reviews, some military officers, including those in Gowon's cabinet, had their reservations about his administration. Now, on the page 109 of that book, Egbese narrated in a discussion Colonel Ibrahim Babangida and Colonel Shehu Yaradua had in January 1975 on their disenchantment with Gowon's administration. Now, further in that discussion, Colonel Yaradua was said to have announced to his colleague that he was planning to stage a coup against General Yakubu Gowon. Several reasons were given for the proposed coup, which included the belief that Gowon's 3R policy of reconciliation, reconstruction, and rehabilitation was quite unnecessary, and that Gowon's shift in the earlier proposed 1973 date of handing over power to a democratically elected civilian government was a plot for him to continue holding on to power, among several others. Now, it was those two officers who brought in others to plan and execute the July 1975 coup. Now, according to the author, the inner core of the coup plotters included Colonel Yaradua, Colonel Babangida, Colonel Joe Gaba, Colonel Anthony Ochofo, Colonel Ibrahim Taiwo, and Colonel Abdullahi Muhammad. While it was stated in the book that some senior officers like Brigadier Theophilus Danjuma, Brigadier Olusegun Obasanjo, Brigadier Martin Adamo, Brigadier Murtala Mohammed, Brigadier Olufemi Olutoyi, and some others were contacted and informed of the plot of the inner core, as in the inner caucus. Now, Murtala Mohammed was reported to have told them to go ahead with the plan and that he would try to protect them if it failed. However, he would not be a part of it. A similar posture was taken by Danjuma when he was said to have informed the coup plotters of not joining them, nor stopping them, but he warned them to avoid bloodshed. Now, it seemed the coup plot was already on when General Gowon, for reasons best known to him, decided to reshuffle his cabinet in late 1974, and I was pleasantly surprised that he brought me into his government in 1975. From my family background and experience in Colonel Ogbomedua government in the Midwest state as a two-time commissioner and as a chairman of various boards and companies, loyalties to the government and country was paramount. But this was not so at my new duty post. In the federal government cabinet, where I became a member, I soon discovered that some members were very recalcitrant and rather disloyal to the government and the nation. It may be necessary to now give a personal view of why I think the 1975 coup was staged against a very humble, respectful, and dignified head of state, particularly by those close to him, that's the military officers. Now, as Federal Commissioner for Information, I worked very closely with Mr. M.D. Yusuf, a fine, polished gentleman who was the Commissioner of Police Special Duties, which is today known as the Director General of Department of State Services, DSS. Now, M.D. Yusuf later became the Inspector General of Police. We used to exchange notes once or twice in a week at my residence. Now, it may be necessary to mention a few of the incidences that happened that exposed the resentment and disloyalty of some of the senior officers, particularly those occupying the rank of colonel. Now, those aggrieved officers were headed by a fine military officer, the late Colonel Shehu Yaradua, whose father was the Minister of Lagos Affairs in the First Republic when Alhaji Tafawa Balewa was the Prime Minister and Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe was the Governor General. Other officers associated with this group included Colonel Wushishi, who later rose to the rank of Major General before he retired, and Colonel Joe Gaba, who has an affinity with the General Yakubu Gowon and was Commander Brigade of Guards. Now, Dodon Barracks, that's Gowon housed him and depended on him. One thought the reason for putting him there was the relative loyalty and outward affection of the younger brother, whose appointment as brigade commander at Dodon Barracks was to ensure the safety and security of the head of state. Now, I noticed that between 1973 and 1974, when I was the Commissioner for Finance in the Midwest under Ogbomodia, Colonel Joe Gaba once visited Benin City, and he was quartered in our number 2 VIP guest house along Gulf Road. I visited him one evening at the guest house, and we had a very cordial discussion as to his responsibility as brigade commander in Dodon Barracks. It was then he told me how close he was to General Gowon. He and Joe Gaba are Angas from Benue, that's Plateau State, and was married to Victoria Zachary, a trained nurse, in 1969. Now, during our discussion, the telephone rang and he took it, gave a salute, and responded, "Yes, sir." The person at the other end conversed with Colonel Gaba in their native language, and after the phone conversation, he sat down and informed me he was speaking to his big brother, General Yakubu Gowon, the head of state. When the announcement of the coup overthrowing General Gowon's government was made by Colonel Gaba from Kanke local government of Plateau State, I almost melted. I was fully aware of the grumbling among some Nigerians and a few open critics of General Gowon, but military men and some politicians. I remember that after having a discussion with General Yakubu Gowon on his misgivings and concerning certain aspects of politics, he set up a committee to work out the details of how and when a civilian administration should be reintroduced. The committee was made up of technocrats, including some university lecturers and professors. Incidentally, I was invited to be part of that committee, and also remember that our late radical lecturer in Abu, Professor Tahir from Bauchi State, was also a member. Unfortunately, the committee had not submitted its report before the government was overthrown by soldiers. Now, the growing tension being created by these dissatisfied young military officers made General Yakubu Gowon to reshuffle his cabinet in January 1975 to enable him to bring into his cabinet some of these young officers. That was how Colonel Wusheshe, Captain Dan Suleiman, Captain Olumide were brought into the cabinet. Another embarrassing incident which showed the disloyalty of some military officers was when General Gowon was to attend the Commonwealth Conference in the West Indies in 1975. At that time, there was a general strike action by the Nigerian Airways pilots. The issue at that time was how the head of state would travel to West Indies. Some suggested that an Air Force captain should fly him to the West Indies when we were sure that all was ready for him to fly to West Indies to attend the conference. And in my position as the Federal Commissioner for Information and Culture, I organized dancers to go to the airport to bid the head of state farewell. I was approached by some military officers, including one military governor, that it was not necessary to arrange such a reception for General Gowon because he did not deserve it. I disregarded this suggestion. One of the immediate causes of the overthrowing of General Gowon's government was the appointment of Engineer Odo, a Calabari man from Rivers State, as the general manager of Nigerian National Oil Corporation, now known as NNPC, that's National Petroleum Company, Nigerian National Petroleum Company. And the government set up a machinery to appoint a Nigerian to take over the management of the establishment. The Minister of Mines and Power was Alhaji Shetima Ali Mongono, a polished, well-educated northerner from Maiduguri. His candidate for the position was Engineer Abba Ghana. Chief Philip Adiodu was the permanent secretary of that ministry. I discovered at the meeting that both of them had separate candidates. While the minister suggested Engineer Abba Ghana, who hailed from Maiduguri, Engineer Odo was sponsored by Chief Philip Asiodu. Another name being mentioned was Engineer Gbadebo from West Nigeria. Some of us in a memo suggested the retainment of an expatriate general manager, that a Nigerian should be appointed to understudy him. The head of state, however, insisted that a Nigerian should be appointed. We now had 3 contestants for the position. Now, in discussing these names, a section of the members led by Brigadier Murtala Mohammed, Federal Commissioner for Communication, strongly objected Odo's nomination because he was an Igbo man and a security risk. Now, a member of the council had then asked why Odo was regarded as a security risk, to which Murtala Mohammed responded that he was an Igbo man who identified himself as Biafran during the Civil War and was responsible for the destruction of the refinery in Port Harcourt. Some of us felt that statement was irresponsible and unpatriotic, considering the fact that General Yakubu Gowon had made an effort to bring the country together after the Civil War. It was now 5 years post-Civil War. Now, in my contribution, I wanted to know from His Excellency, the head of state, how it was not dangerous and discriminatory for an Igbo man now to be called a security risk. 5 years after the war, there would have been no need to fight a war where we lost so many lives and property to bring Nigeria together. I noticed that General Gowon was upset from his countenance. He thereafter announced Engineer Odo as the new general manager of NNOC, which was accepted by the majority of council members. But Brigadier General Mohammed immediately took his case and swaggered stick and walked out without saying another word. Now, 3 days later, MD Yusuf, Commissioner of Special Duties, visited me in the evening at my residence, 23 Temple Road, Ikoyi. During the discussion, he informed me that Brigadier General Mohammed went to Enugu to meet Army Area Commander and did not bother to pay a courtesy call to the Administrator of East Central State, Dr. Umpagbe Asake, who was at that time away on an official visit to Oji River Power Station. He went further to say that he paid similar visit to other military headquarters, including Calabar, Port Harcourt, and Benin City, and that he suspected he was planning something. We later informed We were later informed that Her Majesty the Queen of England may visit Nigeria in the month of September 1975. During that period, our 4-year development plan had been prepared and approved by the Council. I was therefore directed by the head of state to proceed to London to discuss the visit with the British press and to also take along with me several copies of the 4-year development plan, which should be delivered to the Nigerian High Commissioner, His Excellency Alhaji Sule Kulu. Now, coincidentally, Brigadier General Murtala Mohammed and Colonel Dan Suleiman were also traveling the same day with me on a Nigerian Airways flight. Our flight could not land in Kano due to some technical fault, so it had to return to Lagos. During this period on our return, we sat together at the VIP lodge at the airport in Ikeja. We were many that sat together, including MKO Abiola of ITT fame and Alhaji Asiako Rabiu, a wealthy man from Kano, also traveling with General Murtala Mohammed. I understand his son, Alhaji Abdul Saman Isiaku Rabiu, the chairman of Bua Group, continued with the family business. Other prominent passengers were Senator Victor Akan from Cross River and Mr. Silas Dania, MD of NIDB. My permanent secretary, Alhaji Tatari Ali, was also at the airport to see me off. My disagreement with General Murtala Mohammed continued when he asked me why I was defending General Gowon and his government every time and whether I did not know that they made him the head of state and could also remove him if they wanted. My answer was short. I'm a practicing lawyer, ready to go back to my practice anytime it pleases you and your colleagues to remove General Gowon from office. But I would like to know what you think that General Gowon and his government are not doing well. He declared that General Gowon was inefficient and corrupt, and I answered that he was not corrupt and added that if corruption is defined as spending more money than what you are officially entitled to, then he, Murtala, was also corrupt. He angrily asked in what way he was corrupt, and I said, I know your salary as Brigadier General, but you have done things your salary cannot afford. He retorted that I should state them. I said, your wife's baby was dedicated at your residence on 2nd Avenue, Ikoyi. You killed 2 cows. And you had a lavish party where Ebenezer Obey from Abeokuta played. Colonel Shehu Yaradua was the MC and I also attended. You gave me part of the meat. Secondly, when you were a colonel in the Nigerian army in charge of the signals, you used to visit London on several occasions and lodged in a hotel close to Buckingham Palace. I was the Commissioner for Education in the Midwest State and I used to visit London and stayed in the same hotel without seeing or meeting each other. You used to drive in a Jaguar car whenever you were in London, and to crown it all, you have just asked Abiola to ask his manager to send money to your mother in Kano since we could not land in Kano, and I asked if you are a shareholder in ITT. Everyone at the VIP lodge laughed at my statement. Now, the military attaché in London was Colonel Baba Usman, and he was to meet Murtala at Heathrow Airport, while Lawrence Emokwopo, who was also info attaché in London, was to meet me at the same airport. Fortunately for me, my permanent secretary Alhaji Tatari Ali from Bauchi, who later became the elected governor of Bauchi State, was able to inform me the info attaché to go to Gateway Airport, that we had changed our flight from Nigeria Airways to BOAC, which had its base at another airport. And I believe such a message was not sent to the military attaché, who must have gone to Heathrow Airport. I think we were in London for 2 days before the coup took place. While I was in London, I had the audience with the Nigerian High Commissioner Alhaji Sule Kulu and delivered the 4 years development plan as directed. He then invited me to lodge at a very big hotel at the Strand, very close to BBC Bush House. On arrival, I met a former boss, the governor of Midwest States, Colonel F.0 Obemodia, the First Lady, Mrs. Victoria Gowon, and her children, and Mr. Moses Ihode, a close friend of General Gowon and a dedicated Christian from Sabon Gida, Ora in Midwest State, now Edo State, where it was expected that he would hand over the chairmanship of OAU to General Idi Amin Dada. I added that they suggested that he should send a representative who would then hand over the chairmanship to Idi Amin Dada. They think you are too decent to hand over chairmanship yourself. I told him. He retorted by asking, who are they to interfere with the affairs of Africa? Then I asked, "Sir, must you really go?" And he said, "Yes, sir, Your Excellency. Are you sure if the state of security in the country? Because we have unconfirmed information that all may not be well if you travel," I added. He said everything was okay. The call ended and I returned to my seat. General Gowon's wife then asked whether they were planning a coup, and I replied in the negative. We left for our separate places in London after lunch. The next day I got a telephone call from one very tall gentleman, Alhaji Galadima from Borno, who informed me of the coup against General Gowon the previous night, and that General Mohammed, who had been holding meetings at his hotel with officers in London and Europe at the time, had been flown in a KLM flight to Nigeria via Amsterdam to take over the leadership of the government. He advised me not to return home as soldiers were posted to surround my house from the moment the coup happened. He also said that the ADC to the General Gowon, Colonel Wilbert, who was sent by General Gowon to bring a certain briefcase in Kampala, was detained in Nigeria, and he was shocked and surprised that Colonel Joe Gaba, a relation of General Gowon and close confidant and head of the Brigade of Guards, was the one who made the announcement that Gowon's government had been overthrown for corruption, inefficiency, and refusal to hand over to civilians. Now, Professor J.P. Clark, my younger brother, phoned to inform me that that he took a lorry to pack my things for the government quarters, but there were soldiers who prevented him from doing so. I then asked my children and my maid. He said he did not see them, and I became worried. However, minutes later, I got a call from Mrs. Evie Ejuwumi, who was an occupational physiotherapist at Lutz, that when the coup was announced, she rushed to my house and collected my children and some papers in my bedroom because she did not want to leave them behind. Recently, when I was discussing with General Alani Akinrinede, retired, he said he was in London at the time of the coup and had been invited to Murtala Mohammed's meeting but did not attend. He, however, confirmed that some senior officers met with Mohammed at his hotel coup, and that he was first invited to take over. It is therefore not true that Murtala Mohammed did not know about the coup and that he was first invited to take over. Perhaps at this junction, it is necessary to comment on the role of Brigadier General Murtala Mohammed during the Nigerian Civil War. It is important to note that when Murtala Mohammed was in charge of the federal troops trying to cross over into Onitsha from Asaba to capture the city from rebel forces during the Civil War, he encountered great difficulties and was advised against frontal tactics by Lieutenant Colonel Larry Konyan and Lieutenant Colonel Alani Akinronade. Murtala Mohammed, however, disregarded the advice and had many of his troops killed and drowned in the River Niger. It was indeed a great disaster, and he could have been sent away from the army for that. But General Gowon retained him for reasons best known to him and posted him to Signals. He later appointed Murtala as one of the federal commissioners. It is, however, sad that Murtala turned ungrateful to his benefactor, and I have included this account here to show that Murtala Mohammed, like any other person, was not a perfect man, neither was he infallible. Even though he did not participate in the coup in Lagos, he was actively involved in the planning in London. Quite a long read. Nigerians have been reacting. I think I'll have to take a break here. Let's meet in the comment section what's your take. This is coming from a live witness account from our amiable elder statesman, Chief